Tripping toward laughter, Jake's journey to comedy. Jake had always been the clumsiest kid in his neighborhood. His days were filled with little accidents, tripping over things, spilling water, knocking stuff over. Every morning, something went wrong, whether it was stumbling out of bed or pouring juice all over the kitchen counter instead of into his cup. He wasn't trying to be clumsy, it was as if gravity was his personal enemy. Even the simplest tasks turned into mini disasters. But what Jake didn't know was that one particularly clumsy moment would change his life. It was a Friday afternoon when it all happened. Jake had just finished another typical day at school, one where he tripped twice, dropped his pen at least 5 times, and spilled his drink at lunch, again. He arrived home exhausted but excited because his mum had ordered pizza for dinner, and nothing made a bad day better like pizza. They settled into the living room, Jake balancing his plate on his lap, determined not to make any messes tonight. His mum flipped on the TV, and they relaxed into the evening, sharing slices of cheesy, pepperoni-topped goodness. Jake was halfway through his second slice when disaster struck. He stood up from the couch, carefully placing his plate on the coffee table to grab a napkin. But in typical Jake fashion, his foot caught the edge of the coffee table leg, and suddenly, everything went into slow motion. He tried to regain his balance, but it was too late. He stumbled forward, arms flailing, and in the chaos, his right foot came down hard, directly onto his slice of pizza. Splat! The warm pizza squished beneath his foot, and Jake froze, horrified, as he looked down. His sock was now soaked in pizza sauce and squashed cheese. For a second, he stood there in disbelief, one foot sinking into the gooey mess of pizza, the other barely holding him upright as he tried to process what had just happened. His mom stared at him from the couch, eyes wide. Then, a small chuckle escaped her lips. Before long, the chuckle grew into full-blown laughter, her face turning red as she gasped for breath. "Jake, you stepped on your pizza," she managed between fits of laughter. Jake glanced down again, as if seeing the scene for the first time, his own foot smashing his dinner into the carpet like some sort of bizarre comedy routine. A flush of embarrassment swept over him, but as his mum's laughter filled the room, he couldn't help it. The absurdity of the situation hit him all at once, and before he knew it, he was laughing too. He gingerly pulled his foot out of the pizza mess, holding onto the back of the couch to keep from slipping further, and let himself fall onto the cushions. "I guess it's true what they say," Jake said, barely able to catch his breath through his own laughter. "You really are what you eat." His mom laughed harder, clutching her stomach. "Jake, you've got to be the only person in the world who could trip, fall, and step on his pizza all in one motion." Jake shook his head, laughing until his sides ached. As he lay back on the couch, staring up at the ceiling and catching his breath, a strange thought came to him. All these years, he'd been embarrassed by his clumsiness, his constant accidents and mishaps. But maybe, just maybe, his mum was right. Maybe there was something kind of funny about it all. He hadn't meant to step on his pizza, but the way it had happened, the sheer ridiculousness of it, had turned into something more. His mum wasn't laughing at him, she was laughing with him. And in that moment, Jake realized something important. Maybe his clumsiness wasn't a flaw. Maybe it was his thing. His way of making people laugh. That night, as Jake cleaned up the pizza disaster, the gears in his mind started turning. What if he could use all his misadventures as material? What if all those trips, spills, and tumbles were stories waiting to be told? His clumsiness wasn't going away anytime soon, so why not embrace it? The next day at school, Jake approached his friends with a new energy. They were sitting in the cafeteria when he plopped down with his tray and leaned in. "Guys, I think I've discovered my superpower," he said, grinning. His friend Luke raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah? What's that?" "Tripping over your own feet." "Exactly," Jake said, his grin widening. "I'm going to turn my clumsiness into a career. You know, last night I actually stepped on my pizza. With my foot. Just stomped right on it like it was a bug." Luke and Sarah burst out laughing. "I'm serious," Jake continued, getting into the rhythm. "I think I'm going to be a comedian. I've already got tons of material, like how I've probably spilled more water in my life than most people drink." His friends laughed harder, and for the first time, Jake felt something shift inside him. The laughter wasn't the kind that made him feel awkward or ashamed. It was the kind that made him feel good, like he was in control of the joke for once. Over the next few weeks, Jake started paying more attention to his daily mishaps, not as sources of embarrassment, but as inspiration. He turned every little trip and fall into a funny story. Whenever he dropped something or knocked over a drink, instead of apologizing, he'd say, "There's another one for the highlight reel." His friends loved it, and Jake found that the more he laughed at himself, the more everyone laughed with him. It wasn't long before Jake worked up the nerve to sign up for the school talent show. His heart pounded as he wrote out his comedy routine, filled with exaggerated stories of his clumsiness, including the infamous pizza incident. On the night of the talent show, Jake stood backstage, his stomach full of nervous butterflies. But as he stepped out onto the stage and looked at the expectant faces in the audience, something clicked. He wasn't the clumsy kid everyone teased anymore. He was Jake, the guy who could turn tripping on the stairs into a punchline. As he started his set, he made sure to open with the pizza story. "So, last week, I managed to do the impossible," he said, pacing the stage with exaggerated caution. "I stepped on my own pizza. I mean, who does that?" The audience erupted in laughter, and Jake felt a wave of confidence wash over him. He continued, telling stories about his daily battles with gravity and how his water bottles seemed to have a personal vendetta against him. Each joke landed perfectly, and by the end of his set, the entire auditorium was laughing. When the applause came, Jake couldn't stop smiling. He had taken something that used to make him feel awkward and embarrassed and turned it into something that brought joy to others. His clumsiness wasn't a curse anymore. It was his superpower. From that night on, Jake embraced his role as the class comedian, always ready with a story about his latest misadventure. And while he never stopped tripping over things or spilling drinks, he didn't mind anymore. After all, every fall was just another chance to make someone laugh. And that's how Jake, the boy who stepped on his pizza, found his true calling, one stumble at a time.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to support the channel. See you next time.